a.m. This is a regular City Council meeting for January 30th, 2024. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Jordan.
Here.
Councilmember Snedden.
Here.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Here.
And Mayor Rouse.
Here. Very good. Madam Administrator, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there is one change, and that is that we would like to pull agenda item number 7, which is the monthly update to the State Street interim operations. There was a problem with the agenda report, so we'd like to pull it today. We'll bring it back at the next monthly update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we will go to the consent calendar, and we have some items to read.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 1, tenant protection ordinance relating to required one-year lease offers to residential tenants, ordinance adoption. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only, an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending the Santa Barbara Municipal Code by amending sections 26.40.020 and 26.40.030 relating to required one-year lease offers to residential tenants. Item 2, loan to Housing Authority for $6 million for acquisition of property located at 3055 De La Vina Street, ordinance adoption. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only, an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara approving a loan agreement with the Housing Authority of the city of Santa Barbara in the amount of $6 million for the acquisition of real property located at 3055 De La Vina Street to be used for permanent affordable housing to be secured by a deed of trust and by a 90-year affordability control covenant imposed on real property, and authorizing the Community Development Director to execute such agreements subject to approval as to form by city attorney as necessary. Item 3, municipal code cleanup amendments relating to peddling, soliciting, and vending on public and private property, ordinance introduction. Recommendation the council will introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only, an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by amending chapters 9.48 and 9.49 and by repealing chapter 5.32 relating to peddling, soliciting, and vending on public and private property. And item 4, contract amendments for Santa Barbara Airport Master Drainage Plan Update Resolution Agreement. Recommendation the council B adopt by reading of title only, a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending resolution number 23076, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2024 to appropriate funds for professional services contract for the airport master drainage plan update.
All right, very good. Are there any items anybody on council needs to pull for discussion or separate vote? All right, and there is a request, public request to speak on item 1, so we'll come back to that. So may I have a motion for the balance of the consent calendar absent item 1?
So moved. Second.
Okay, vote please. Moved by Friedman, seconded by Jordan. Count passes unanimously. All right, very good. And with that, we'll go to general public comment for 3 minutes on the podium and any item that is within the purview of this body. And first up will be Daniel Simon.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am a longtime resident of Santa Barbara. I'm speaking specifically in follow-up to a letter I wrote to all of you on January 2nd regarding the proposed renovation at the bathrooms at Ledbetter Beach. The main thrust of numerous people who swim there, we have over 300 signatures to present, and that's just in the last couple of weeks because we found out about these changes only recently during the holidays, and we've just sort of mobilized because we disagree with the proposal, and we wanted the city council to be aware of it, the mayor. We want people to give us a chance, give the town a chance to look at this more carefully. They're talking about ADA renovations. We have no problem with that. Nobody has a problem with that, I'm sure. However, we do not want to lose benefits that we're using for over 50 years at this location. There's changing rooms for men and women, and there are spaced separate shower faucets out of each wall, there's 3 on each wind wall that blocks the wind, gives a modicum of privacy. They're just sort of U-shaped, and they're in front of the bathrooms there. And that wind wall and reasonable, humane distance to shower with is useful to everybody. And it's not just a bunch of swimmers, 300 or 500 or how many. I have been going there for 39 plus years. I've met people from all over the world, and there's 400,000 in this county. Many people are coming from Bakersfield, many people coming from you name it, Santa Ynez, to come into the beach, and they need a place to change when they shower, when they rinse off the sand. And they need a place to change. And these changing rooms, the big alleged problem is that there's riffraff. There's people drinking or smoking or there at night or whatever. And there's this issue of the harbor. We're hearing about this line of sight. I mean, there's been no talk about needing a line of sight for 50 years, but now they want a line of sight. Are you going to get a line of sight into a changing room? Are you going to get a line of sight into a bathroom? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And what makes sense is to renovate this place and have it be accessible to the whole world that comes to this bathroom. There's 2 major places to go to the beach. We're so lucky in this town to have this beach on our doorstep, and in Ledbetter Beach, that bathroom facility is used by so many millions of people over the last 50 years, as is. We ask that you open up to the public, take a survey, take summer account of who's there. It's definitely something that needs looking more into before you just take away these benefits of a changing room that goes hand in hand with, showering. You got to give a place to change. Thank you so much for your time.
Sue Hollingsworth, and followed by Cindy Coyne.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Simon's comments. My name is Sue Hollingsworth. I live in District 2. I swim all year round at Ledbetter and use the showers. The proposed design for the Ledbetter Beach bathroom remodels should be improved in 3 relatively small ways. I applaud the long overdue modernization that will conform to ADA guidelines, making an important community facility available to all. However, the proposed design calls for significant reductions in portions of the facility that are frequently used by numerous residents and tourists. I recommend 3 modifications. First, the current showers can be used simultaneously by 6 people showering plus 2 people washing their feet for a total of 8. The proposed design reduces the total to 6 simultaneous users because some of the shower heads on the 2 poles will be stacked one above the other. A simple fix would be to add a 3rd ADA accessible pole shower with multiple heads. Second, the current building offers 8 changing stalls plus 8 toilet stalls for a total of 16 simultaneous users. Reducing the number of toilet stalls from 8 to 6 makes sense in order to create stalls large enough to accommodate wheelchairs. However, removing the unplumbed changing stalls is a bad idea. It will force significantly more people into the toilet stalls. Overall, this reduction from 16 to 6 simultaneous users will be harmful to our community. Whatever bad behavior occurs in the changing rooms now also occurs in the toilet stalls, so crime reduction cannot be used as an excuse to eliminate the changing spaces. Lastly, many swimmers have asked for some sort of windbreak next to the showers. If solid walls have created hidden spaces enabling bad behavior, then transparent materials such as plexiglass might be used. There has been an outcry from the year-round swimming community during December and January. As the weather warms up, more users, including night moves and outrigger race participants, and the many families who swim at the beach in the summer, will all be upset by the deficiencies. Please act now to make these small design improvements before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy Coyne.
Hi, I'm Cindy Coyne. I stand behind everything that Daniel and Sue just said. I sent you a letter about my experience at Ledbetter. I'm kind of wondering why we haven't been appreciated in our solutions in terms of more security. I know that money is an issue. However, if someone were to patrol the facility a few times for a few months, we wouldn't need it forever. It's something that was done at the Goleta Library, and it was very successful. So it wouldn't be continuing to hire extra security. It's something that would solve the problem, because people would get the word. We can't hang out and misuse it. I personally feel that there is a lot of misuse there. It's not inviting sometimes, and that we should deal with it, but not by tearing it down. That's not gonna help the cause. The more people that are there, the more families that are there to use it, the less it will be misused. I think we should put up signs that say, "Welcome to Ledbetter Beach. This is a family and beachgoer facility. Please respect it. No smoking, no littering, no loitering." And even put up a sign what to do with the tar on your feet, so people won't be scraping their feet all over the place. And maybe paint it. Have an artist come and maybe involve children to make it really nice. We don't have to tear it down to make it safe, but I would like it to be safe. I feel like it's really important. The restaurant, the Shoreline Cafe, is a part of our community, and we meet people in there. We meet people. I meet my neighbors there. I meet people from all different countries there. It's an exciting place. The walls go like this. So when you're taking a shower, it's not just protection from the elements. You're meeting with people. You just have this place. You're all together. It creates community. And that's good for our community. It's good for all the foreigners, the people from other countries. It's awesome. We meet all different kinds of people. And we all tell them to go to the restaurant and what to eat at that restaurant, because we love the restaurant. So it's a whole united kind of, it's a great place. I feel so fortunate to be a part of it and to be able to live in such a beautiful place. And I just feel like money could be spent better. We could use gates on the changing rooms, and we could use climbing devices. I think that there are solutions there. Thank you.
All right, very good. Are there any speakers online, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. With that, we'll close general public comment, and we'll go to the poll consent item, which is item 1, which has already been read. The speaker is Rick Hansen. And just to remind everyone, this is an item that was brought back this week because simply was overlooked on the agenda last week and wasn't printed. So this is it's the second reading, but not.
All right, thank you. Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Hanson.
Mayor and City Council. My name is Rick Hansen. I live in Kristen Sneddon's district. I've rented a one-bedroom cottage in downtown Santa Barbara for the last 35 years. For the past 2 years, I and my fellow tenants of the property have been harassed by a landlord who bought the property with the sole intent of evicting all tenants as soon as he could so that he could double and triple the rents. He quickly managed to bully multiple tenants into leaving. He executed these evictions without following the Santa Barbara City ordinance relating to legal eviction procedure. He next came after those of us who had leases from the prior owner. He waited until these leases lapsed and then attempted 2 times to evict us illegally. With the help of the Santa Barbara Tenants Union and legal aid, we've organized and resisted. This landlord has never offered a lease to any of the tenants because he and his lawyer believe that they can get away with it. Why do they believe this? Because they can, and nothing has been done about it. Even though the city ordinance says he must offer a lease to qualified tenants, this landlord has refused to do so because the language of the ordinance implies that if he waits for a year without offering a lease, then he doesn't ever have to. And that's the way they interpret it, and that's why they've done what they've done. And a tenant without a lease is much easier to evict. This landlord uses harassment, intimidation, and the convenience of minor repairs to renovict. You can stop this abusive behavior by clearly stating that qualified tenants must be offered a lease or else. And that tenants have a right to return with the minimal protection of a sensible rent cap. And now, what is a sensible rent cap? I say it is exactly the same as the tax cap for property owners. 2%. That's right, 2%. All the costs of the landlord to operate their enterprise are business expenses. They have no right, that is landlords, have no right to expect tenants to pay more than they themselves pay and are required to pay for the right to a home. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And with that, I will entertain a motion on item 1 from the consent calendar. It's moved by Harmon. Second by Jordan. Can we have a vote, please?
And this is for item 1, a motion by Councilmember Harmon, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Jordan. Please go ahead and vote.
Passed unanimously. Thank you. With that, we'll go to council committee member assignment reports. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the Central Coast Water Authority Board of Directors meeting, and also our Beacon met last week. And I want to thank our city waterfront department for participating in that meeting with a presentation on the storms from January of 2023 and December of 23. We had different agencies from throughout the Beacon jurisdiction each present, so there's about 10 presentations on the storm impacts, and appreciated our staff participating in that. Thank you.
Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I attended the Joint Cities County Affordable Housing Group and heard presentations on achieving pro-housing designation and citizen pro-housing advocacy. And at the next meeting, we'll be hearing updates from individual cities on builder's remedy.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just highlight of my last couple of weeks, so as I walked through the open house yesterday of the 600 block of, hopefully, without jinxing it, the city's new site for a neighborhood navigation center. We'll see that lease, I think, in the first or second week of February, but if you remember the old Chad's restaurant that's right next door and the old Dudek space, which for all my life I've driven by there and just thought it was another little building set back in a parking lot, but that building goes all the way through to the back street, to that little street that runs parallel to Chapala. 2 stories. It is by far the best looking facility in terms of offering what we need to consolidate the operations at Alameda Park and the Castillo commuter lot into one place. Has the room plus reasonable, better than usual hand-me-down type facilities for our partner agencies where they can sit in an office respectfully and do work like they're actually employees in an office. So if you haven't gone by there, you could ask Barbara Anderson. She'll get you by there too, but it was a pretty impressive showing on a great new spot to work on the downtown homeless situation.
All right, very good. I briefly went by the point in time count at 5:30 in the morning, and there was good participation. Mr. Gutierrez was there as well. A lot of staff from Santa Barbara, which was pretty impressive, I thought, and understand it went very well. Very quickly went to the Boys and Girls Club to give out the membership attendance awards, and it's a pretty gratifying thing to do and see what our kids are doing with that club. And then yesterday was at the athletic roundtable to give out the award for the Special Olympic Athlete of the Month, which was always rewarding. And with that, we have any other things going on there? Doesn't look like it. We'll move to our administrative calendar. We have an item to read.
Vision 2030 Initiative, item 6.
All right, very good. Mr. Bodett, is this you or Ms. Ryerly? Very
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and council members. I'm going to kick it off. I'm Renee Irely, the Assistant City Administrator, and I'm joined by the team. There's 7 of us who are leading the Vision 2030 efforts for our staff. So I'll be introducing the initiative, and each of them will provide details on the efforts that they're leading. Obviously, as you're acutely aware, the city has weathered some challenging economic circumstances over the last few years. And for this, we are, working on our ability to continue to provide high-quality services and take care of our qualified staff. As we came out of the pandemic, our whole executive team began evaluating our long-term fiscal sustainability and some of the creative ways that we started doing business that we adopted during COVID. As we did that work, we realized we had an opportunity to think about how we serve Santa Barbara in the 21st century, and to look at not only our fiscal and operational challenges, but what makes us unique, and use this review to make sure we're operating in a fiscally responsible way and making the most of our incredibly valuable and innovative staff. And that led to the initiative we've branded as Vision 2030. So this entire initiative really embodies the essence of good governance and best practices. We believe that regular, thoughtful, collaborative evaluation leads to better systems and improved processes and service delivery and happier staff. And empowering our diverse team members to work together to achieve this vision is really the key to its success. There are 4 core pillars in Vision 2030. Fiscal sustainability, innovation, operational optimization, and a thriving workforce. To initially embark on this work, we've created 4 working groups to define priorities and areas of assessment around each of the pillars. Additionally, we took the opportunity to revamp our performance measures and to align them with Vision 2030, and that's known as CORE. Currently, we have over 100 staff throughout the city that are involved in the 4 working groups, and we'll continue to engage and expand participation as we roll out Vision 2030 over the next several years. Obviously, this takes a coordinated and collaborative effort to engage our staff, and our ultimate goal is to build on the mindset of continuous improvement, collaboration, and creativity that already exists in our organization and have it embedded everywhere in the culture of the city. We know this takes time, and we are truly, in our first year of this effort. In the 3 timeline slides that you have in your packet, we've laid out some milestones in each of the pillars to help us gauge what success looks like in this process. And our goal in reaching an integrated system for the city, we envision highly functioning work groups around these 4 pillars with detailed outcomes, identified and specific core measurements for each of our departments, and aligned and balanced budgets, and having this integrate with council priorities as you're guiding the organization. So that's the overview, and with that, the leaders of the teams will now give you more detail about what we've been up to over the last few months, and I'll hand this over to Mr. Bodette, our Senior Assistant to City Administrator.
Thank you, members of council and mayor. So one of the first programs we wanted to look at was our performance measurement program. And performance measurements has become ingrained into local government for decades. So much so that if you want to submit a fiscal or a financial document for an award, a performance measurement program typically is a requirement to do so. So they've really become an ingrained and a part of our culture. However, we wanted to take a look at that and reevaluate a little bit. And what was the significance behind some of those performance measures, and were they accurate? For instance, if the city clerk processed 1,000 council agenda reports in a year and 500 the next, what is the significance of that? Is that really indicative of our workload and the quality of work that we were doing? So we wanted to reevaluate those types of situations. In addition, in my opinion, one thing that performance measurement kind of falls short on is the ability to fail. It's hard to try new things, communicate in different ways if we're being mandated to succeed. So one aspect that we wanted to kind of explore was pilots programs, things that we could try differently and evaluate. And lastly, in leveraging technology, it was a legacy database that we were using to store all this information. So we need to reevaluate how we store and vote and how we report out in a more communicative manner. So what we came up with was CORE. It's an acronym for City Outcomes Reaching for Excellence, and it aligns with 3 primary pillars of Vision 2030: the organizational optimization, innovation, and most importantly, thriving workforce. That was something that our performance measurement program did not address, was our workforce, and ways that we can address and help our workforce out. So how the process works is each department goes and develops goals that align with those specific pillars. And this was a great exercise for us to conduct. It allowed departmental leadership to kind of make priority statements that align with those specific pillars and allow us to kind of view as what's our priorities and how we are going to address those. The performance measurements organically came afterwards. So those are the actionable steps that we're taking to reach those priority statements. Some examples of departments are kind of shown above. One thing that came up repeatedly when in internal communications was communication, both internally and externally. Something our existing performance measurement program did not address was fostering more interdepartmental collaboration and communication. So several departments kind of leveraged that a little bit and made performance measurements that address that allowed them to collaborate with other departments and communicate better. How this process would work from a reporting perspective is internally, we would check in, see where we're at, where we're progressing throughout the year, and then report out externally through the budget process of our process and how we're doing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith DeMartini to talk about our fiscal sustainability group.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse, members of the City Council. I'll give a quick update on the city's initiatives in regards to fiscal sustainability and the revenue working group. So in short, the goal of fiscal sustainability is to make sure that the city has adequate financial resources to ensure that the city continues to meet the needs of the Santa Barbara community, not only today, but in the years to come. So really looking at it from a long-term perspective. And the marching orders for the revenue working group are to really focus on revenues, to really develop a list, a comprehensive list of all of the ways in which the city can expand upon its existing revenue sources or consider new potential revenue measures to deliver those promises to the Santa Barbara community. Next slide, please. So first, let's just talk about revenue maximization. There are many things that we can do currently at the staff level and at the city council level to make sure that the city is generating the maximum amount of revenue from its existing revenue sources. For our general fund taxes, we have a very robust audit program. So for our sales tax, business license tax, utility users tax, and franchise fees, we routinely audit those revenue sources today. And with City Council's approval recently, we have expanded our audit program to move into auditing transient occupancy taxes for hotels and also cannabis. That is work that Council authorized. We are beginning that work currently. Council also authorized the pilot program for the short-term rental enforcement program. A component of that will potentially include additional sort of back due taxes owed for those short-term rental operators. And then also looking at potential future revenue measures. Next slide, please. Under the umbrella of financial planning and fiscal sustainability, we've done quite a lot of work on pension management over the past couple of years. The City Council adopted one comprehensive reserve policy, sort of taking individual reserve policy resolutions and combining them into one comprehensive citywide policy, and at that action just over a year ago, establishing a pension stabilization reserve. City Council also recently adopted a pension management policy that is sort of a guiding document for the city going forward about all the ways in which we can make progress in reducing that liability and ultimately reducing our pension expenses. And then finally, the most decisive action was taken to establish the Section 115 trust. And this is going to add a lot of additional stability for our pension costs going forward, and it will reduce our liability going forward as well. So next, let's move into the cost recovery and revenue policy. This was the major outcome of the revenue working group over the past year. City Council adopted this resolution and adopted this policy at the conclusion of last budget cycle. And the major goals of this cost recovery policy is to really act as a guideline for staff and the City Council as to what is the appropriate level of fee that should be charged for the variety of different services that the city provides to the community. It talks about the level of recovery. If there is to be a subsidization for a particular fee, why is that and what is the right level? It talks about the annual process for changing fees, an annual indexing assumption to account for a sort of inflationary cost of living assumptions, when a fee study should be conducted for a certain group of fees, and what are different assumptions that should be included for overhead. There are fees that we charge as a city to the public, and those fees sort of range from a very, very sort of private benefit that an individual might get from that service to a more broader public benefit. And those fees are really governed by state law. There's a whole process that we must go through to determine the reasonable relationship of the service being provided to that fee, the level of cost recovery. So this is really governed by state law. If you go to the next slide, what it sort of shows here on this pie chart, that a fee is made up of multiple components. There's the direct cost associated with delivering that service to the public, but there are also indirect costs. There are support staff, there are other costs to the city that might not be directly part of that service being provided, but it is an overall cost to the city and supports those programs. So really looking at this from a wholesale, comprehensive lens. The next slide really shows the nuts and bolts of that policy that was established, and it shows fees in these three different tier buckets. For those services that really only provide a direct benefit to the individual that is the recipient of that service, like a private tennis lesson, as an example, those fees really are recommended to be fully cost recoverable. But as you move sort of down the tiers where there is more of a public benefit that is recognized for those services, it would be more appropriate for the council to consider a level of subsidization of the general fund, and it's sort of shown here on this sliding scale. Again, this is a guideline. This is a guideline that staff now have, they're trained on. It will be part of our annual budgeting process going forward. Next slide here. Now we're going to move into the other charge of the revenue working group, which is to brainstorm and really think through all the other ways in which we could generate revenue as an organization. We went through this really robust process where we developed a criteria used to evaluate these revenue options, and then we also brainstormed on all the ways that we could generate revenue. And we came up with a list of about 70 individual ways to generate more revenue as an organization. We evaluated those options and we kind of drew the line at where we think we could kind of move forward to make a recommendation and really bring that information forward to you. We are working towards bringing that to the Finance Committee first, sometime probably in May, and then again after that to the full City Council. This slide here shows the criteria that the working group evaluated our revenue generating options with. Not all options are the same. Some are expensive to implement. They might take a new system, may take a lot of staff time. Some revenue is more volatile than others. There's more cyclicality in certain revenues. Some revenue options can just be implemented at the staff level. Some require City Council approval. Some require voter approval, right? So really thinking through all the legal, administrative requirements for administering these revenue options was really important to this working group. Next, we scatter plotted these items. So we weighted the amount of potential annual revenue we could get on the on the y-axis going up, and then on the x-axis going down, the weighted score of that evaluative criteria, the level of effort required for the city to implement those revenue options. And then on the top upper right quartile, we those will be the ones that we would want to consider the most. And so on the next slide is sort of our scatter plot for the taxes that were considered. And again, this is just sort of illustrative in nature. We will go into detail with the Finance Committee and then the City Council in the next number of months. And what it shows is that certain tax options sort of rose to the top. The sales tax measure could be considered generating a sort of a greater amount of revenue compared to other revenue options as well. Transient occupancy tax was reviewed and considered. The real property transfer tax was also reviewed and considered, and some other ones were as well. And we indicated on the sort of whiskers on the top and bottom the level of volatility or sort of the variability that should be considered when considering these types of options. We also went and scatter plotted other types of revenue generating options, mostly around fees, around downtown parking, other parking related fees, sort of so on and so forth. This was a very comprehensive list, just sort of graphically showing sort of examples of where we kind of landed as a group. That concludes my slides. I'll turn it over to Mr. Cure on the next section.
Mayor, members of council, Justin Cure, IT Director. I'm going to speak to you today about the Organizational Optimization Working Group. The goal of the Organizational Optimization Working Group is to identify, advance, and implement process improvements to the city's current service delivery model. We're working to accomplish this by reviewing our organization and our technologies to encourage innovation. We're looking at our policies, municipal code, processes, and our performance to help us create a thriving workforce. We're prioritizing city services for organizational optimization. And lastly, we're looking at expenditure reductions to help improve our fiscal sustainability. Next slide. The process that the organizational optimization team has taken to reach our goals is what you see before you. We met for many months to create a very lengthy list of potential projects to address. Then we developed some criteria as well to rank those potential projects. Some examples of the criteria are: what is the overall feasibility of implementing this change? How broad is the impact of the change to the organization? How quickly can the change be implemented? At that point, we ranked all the projects, came to a consensus on what to work on first, and then we divided it up into 3 sub-teams. We then present our results to the city administrator for potential implementation, and then get your approval if needed on whatever the implementation is. The first sub-team project consisted of our intra-city or ICS funds. This team reviewed all the ICS funds and then took a deeper look at the facilities ICS model. This included a review of their rate methodology and a fiscal study on internal and external services and costs. The final result provided the Public Works Director an understanding of the level of service, how it may be streamlined, and the most efficient approach to these services. Next slide. The Special Events and Nonprofits sub-team is reviewing our existing special events and nonprofits for funding, community benefit, staff resource demands, and policy recommendations. This team is currently working on a comprehensive review of city-supported events and quantifying the funding. One change that's already occurred is that some of the funding has moved to a 2-year funding cycle, which results in a greater staff efficiency. The procurement process sub-team did a review of our existing procurement processes to find efficiencies and improvements. This team began its work by evaluating best practices relevant to other California cities. They then identified that signing authority and lowest bid had the most impacts on staff efficiency and the outcome of projects. Finally, the team submitted their findings to the city administrator and then on to you, the city council, for approval. City council did vote to approve many of the team's recommendations. This included increasing the city administrator's authority, which equates to an approximate staff time annual savings of $70,000. Increasing the threshold for triggering competition, which is approximately a savings of $1,000 annually. Increasing the formal competitive award threshold, which is approximately a savings of $9,000 annually. And lastly, allowing the option for best value bidding for goods and general services of $100,000 or more. One final recommendation was added to the ballot in May for best value bidding for public works projects. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll now turn it over to Wendy Levy to discuss thriving workforce.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. I'm very excited to be here. I have a lot of great information to share with you. Not to disparage my colleagues, but I think this is the most important aspect of Vision 2030 and how we elevate and embrace our employees and create a really good employee experience. So thriving workforce was developed as a pillar because we know that the city depends on employees to get our services out to the community, to treat our customers well. And so what this group does is really think about that community interaction. How do we provide services better, right? But also taking into an aspect of what that employee's experience is like. So it looks at all of our processes. How can we do them better? How can we make things faster? What are our pain points and how do we improve that? So next slide. So what does it take to have a thriving workforce? Well, it takes a thriving workforce think tank, which is what this group is. We focused for this year on recruitment and retention. And part of that involved sustainable market positions for our salaries. We did a lot of analysis of our salaries and adjusted some salaries based on what the market was bearing. We looked for innovation. This group looks at innovation. How can we do things in a new way, not the way we've always done them? IDEA is our inclusion, diversity, and equity in action group. We jointly pair with them to think about our ideas not only from a thriving workforce standpoint, but also from that equity lens to ensure that everything we do has that balance. I Suggest is one of the programs that was developed to ensure that all of our employees can have a thumbprint on the way we do things. Providing employees the resources, knowledge, and skills that they need to not only develop, to feel fulfilled, and to achieve where they want to go. And then finally, our ultimate goal is to be an employer of choice. Next slide. So we're in phase one. We really had a focused on recruitment and retention and what it took. I just want to share some statistics that I think will be important to you. Of course, we all know we went through the Great Resignation, and post-COVID, we had really high vacancy rates. At one point, we were at 15% vacancies. I'm happy to report that we are at 9.49% vacancy rate, which is actually lower than we've been for a while. Our turnover rate is also 9.1%, and on average, that is about 10 to 12%. So we are doing really good. I will also say that for our recruitments, we are seeing higher applicant volume, which makes me think that we are trending in the right direction. So we're getting qualified applicants and a volume of applicants, which is really good. I had one other thing I wanted to add to that. To get to where we wanted to go, to reduce our vacancy rates, to keep our retention rate low, we had to design new campaigns for advertising, how we look when people look us up, how we added, different concepts of videos to our recruitments and fashion them so that we were appealing to multiple generations, not just one generation that's used to the quote-unquote government posting. So we really added elements that were exciting and kind of trendy. Additionally, when we went through the bargaining process with our MOUs, we had to think about concepts and terms that people would be appreciative of, not currently, to those not currently in the bargaining unit, but what does that look like to potential applicants? How can we get applicants to come here? And then we are working in a workforce that has multiple generations, and we want to be inclusive of all of those generations. So how do we work, how do we do things to encompass all of those so everyone has access to what they need? Next slide. So I just want to introduce you to those members of the Thriving Workforce team, and I don't want to belabor it, but I would love to give you all their names. On this group is Angie Dowse, Lynn Burrich, Matt Nero, and this is in order. Raven Rutledge, Maricela Hart, Brian Fetterman, Rochelle Pegg, Zach Smith, Ariana Bilek, Terry Franson, Ignacio Valdez, Alec Ayala, Ethan Ragsdale, Tina Diaz, Donovan McCrone, and Sam Furtner. And I will tell you that all of these people do a lot of work, a lot of mental gymnastics, and try to come up with some very creative recommendations that will be palatable not only to them, but to the entire city. They're doing some hard work. The next group is our IDEA team, and their focus is on equity, looking at things through the equity lens. Have we created access to all groups, to all employees, so that everyone feels included? Those members are Sarita King, Jason Dane, Terry Franson, Jonathan Abad, Scott Nelson, Hillary Allen, Mariana Cruz, Rochelle Pegg, Nicholas Lopez, Jennifer Hollywood, Ariana Bilek, Naomi Kovacs, Lisa Newbert, Moses Romo, Alec Ayala, and not pictured is Alyssa Zuniga. And again, I just want to say how proud I am of the work these folks are doing. It takes a lot of work. It takes time out of their jobs. Workloads are heavy, but this is really important work. And so the accomplishments, I want to make sure that they have that FaceTime with you. And if you see them on the street, thank them. Anyway, as my colleagues mentioned, we all went through a kind of process to get to where we are. So this group, we had a brainstorming session, and on the next slide, you'll see we came up with 95 ideas. How do we make this place better? What are the pain points? What are ideas we can use? What are other organizations using? So we did that brainstorm. We had evaluation criteria. We kind of broke them down. Is this palatable? What are the optics of this? Can we afford this? So we went through all of that criteria, and then the group ranked all of those options and made a decision as to what rose to the top and what could wait for later. And so based on that, we broke the group into subgroups, and each of them had a piece of what those themes were. And I'll show you the themes on the next slide. We are looking, right now we are at the stage of a recommendation and proposal that will be coming forward to the city administrator. And then hopefully, depending on that feedback, we will move to implementation. Next slide, please. And so those 95 ideas, as I spoke of in the earlier slide, broke down into themes of communication, benefits and salary, training and onboarding, morale and culture, and policies and procedures. And just so you know, each of those groups has something they are working on for a recommendation. So for example, on communication, we have a Did You Know series that will, not only for new employees, but for existing employees, bring out some city elements that people just don't know about. Did you know about? Did you know? So that's a really exciting presentation that will be coming forward on an ongoing basis. For benefits and salary, this group is looking at paid parental leave. This is something that's come up previously, and a lot of organizations around our region are doing this type of leave, and so researching that and potentially bringing forward a recommendation for that. Training and onboarding, this group is looking at our onboarding process, developing true onboarding where people not only know the HR aspect of onboarding, but also how does their department onboard them? What are some things that people need to know to be successful when they hit the ground? And that group is focused on that, and we'll be doing an auditing of our new employee orientation. And for morale and culture, we recently had a employee engagement survey that went out, and so we are compiling the results, and based on what the outcomes of that are, we'll be looking at what programs we can implement, what do we need to improve to maybe build up some of the statistics that we find. Next slide, please. So just to show you some of the things we're working on, and this was, some of these things were in process before Vision 2030, but Vision 2030, the Thriving Workforce Group has weighed in on a lot of these. So not only do we have the Thriving Workforce, we have a leadership development program called CLA, City Leadership Academy, and that really prepares future leaders and provides them with all of the tools they will need to be successful as a leader in this organization. Of course, we have IDEA. IDEA has floated out a Lead with IDEA training program. We've actually shared that with our regional partners at the county and other organizations. This group looks at everything through that equity lens, which is so important. We have our Super Essential series, and based on feedback, we increased this to include 6 core trainings that supervisors and managers should take, and it's a certificated program. Very important topics that supervisors need to have in their back pocket. Our class and comp study is, of course, underway. We should have some type of draft report in late April or early May. And of course, you will be presented with those findings sometime thereafter. And then our Did You Know series, as I've already spoken about. Next slide. One of the things that came out of the employee engagement survey that the Thriving Workforce Group looked at was a wellness program. And so out of that, we derived Balance You. And hopefully you've seen some of those emails that talk about webinars and how to be healthy in the workplace and outside of the workplace. This is really focused on wellness, and we're hoping to have a push out of different items every other month or so. Snow Wonder is underway, and that's a program where you join a team and have to walk 6,000 steps every day with your team, and it's a competitive thing, so get involved. This is really exciting. A lot of organizations have this, and I'm really excited to see where we go with this as we move down the line. Next slide. I Suggest is our idea of a suggestion box. People will submit suggestions for improvements across the city. We actually have implemented some, and I will show you on the next slide. Some of the things from our last year's I Suggest launch that came about, we actually implemented streamlining the administrative signature process. We had a disconnect when it came to HR and PAFs in the department. We implemented improvement through the suggestion we got through I Suggest. An onboarding checklist. We're working on that and using NeoGov, our new one of our new applications to implement those things. We have an internship program that we will be implementing. And then eliminating duplicate pay stub notices. These things that seem so simple, but once they're brought to our attention, can be easily changed and streamlines things. So what are our next steps? So we just completed an employee engagement survey. And what was exciting is that we had a 75% increase over our first employee engagement survey. We had a total of 568 participants, which is, I mean, very, very good. We were hoping for 60%. We were almost there. So based on that, we're going to bring the data to both IDEA and Thriving Workforce Think Tank. They will look at what the feedback was and how do we kind of improve based on those results. More recommendations from the employee groups will be coming forward. And what will be really exciting is this is brand new and we'll see how that goes. They're looking, as I said, at ideas like parking and parental leave. So lots of things to come in the future. Our classification and compensation study, we talked about that, recommendations, and how that will enhance how we look in our, as a competitor in our region, which is really important that we are competitive, that we put a competitive value on our wages. And then NeoGov modules, that's one of the things that is really exciting. It's going to be a one-stop shop for things like forms and onboarding and training. So we'll have one central record keeping for all of those types of items. And with that, I just want to end with Again, I'm very excited to do this work. I think the folks on the team are very excited to do the work. I thank you for listening, for supporting this. We have great support at the department head and staff level too. So thank you very much. And I want to pass it on to Brian Latchford, our PIO.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and council members. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Brian Latchford. I'm the city's public information officer. As you've already heard during this presentation, a lot of great work has been done across the 4 pillars of Vision 2030, and I'm going to highlight some of the specific communications elements focusing on these. So early in Vision 2030 inception, a small group of us took the lead, of course, to design the Vision 2030 logo and the branding and start building out the content for our webpage. And this page outlines all of the principles and progress to help educate staff and provide resources for how staff can engage with this initiative. And so that was our kind of first foray into our internal engagement. We've also done presentations, of course, across Core 3 and Essential SB to foster understanding and support engagement for these initiatives. We started to create some creative flyers. There's one up there now. We had this idea where how do we get staff really engaged in some of these initiatives, and maybe we start doing, I think this is kind of the beginning of the Did You Know series too, where we put in a riddle, get staff to scan a QR code, takes them to the answer, but then also includes more information to learn about how they can get engaged specifically in Vision 2030 and to learn more about its progress. And of course, we have all of our feedback tools to directly hear from staff and to encourage creative thinking around these processes, and our working groups to allow staff to collaborate on projects and incorporate new ideas. And this initial communications subgroup for Vision 2030 will now be incorporated into our larger citywide communications committee, which meets monthly. Next slide. So that was our internal strategies and what we've done so far in this year, and we'll continue to do that and expand those. And this is the first element of our public outreach. Essentially, was the first component was Essential SB, and we've created the webpage. Of course, we had presentations to key business groups, civic clubs, HOAs, nonprofits, and other community groups. We launched a survey in Spanish and English, and we created 4 videos that highlighted some of the essential services across the city and promoted all of these activities with our social media accounts. Next slide. So I did want to highlight the 4 videos. Our staff worked with our Awesome City TV team to create the videos highlighting essential services and to help educate the public about some of the challenges faced in maintaining those services. And so all of the Essential SB materials can be found at that URL below, the /Essential SB. Next slide. So Essential SB being the first element with public communication, these are additional ways which we're going to expand outreach for all of Vision 2030's 4 pillars. And as we develop and hone this outreach, we'll of course look for participation and feedback and analysis over what's working and what's not working, and change the strategy as we move forwards. And so we will be developing of course, a public education website specifically for all of these. It'll match pretty similarly to our internal our intranet webpage. We will focus on language access and equity, of course, focusing on having communications in English and Spanish and available translation, interpretation resources throughout each of these communications channels. We'll expand our interactive workshops, information which will include information about upcoming workshops designed for community involvement and feedback. And we'll grow our media strategy, with a blend of free and paid media to maximize our outreach for the different campaigns as we launch them. We're also going to be looking at community forum pages, which will allow us to kind of hone some more focused community engagement and conversation around it, rather than just a survey which we get information in. We'll actually have more conversation around specific topics that we choose as we go forwards. And that page will also then be pushing out updates, of course, to the residents visiting those pages and additional information from Vision 2030. and strategic partnerships to further expand Vision 2030's reach and participation. And we're building a local, a listing of different groups that we can expand to, depending on what Vision 2030 element we're actually going to be pushing information out as. Next slide. And so we're planning to do a next update to council summer 2024, so this summer. And that wraps my portion of the presentation. Any questions for the team?
Thank you. Back to council for questions. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll get down in the weeds way too quick. So first, I just want to make sure I don't forget to say thank you. And it's like a big bite of a big, or maybe a little bite of a really big apple that you've started on. So one of you wants to take this, or Keith could step back up there. So what I'm really concerned about in all the slides, there is not a slide for expense reduction. That most of the slides simply focus on how to increase our revenue. And so why is that? Why is it not just as important to look for ways to take static or growing expense and out into the future, make that less of a cost as an expense, regardless of all the ways you're tech or gaining, trying to push revenues? Why are we not, why is that not a subject matter just like revenue is?
Yes, Councilmember Jordan, thank you for that question. And it is definitely part of this program. And I would say it's mostly being considered under the organizational optimization working group, where we are trying to identify efficiencies in the way that we deliver services to the community, our internal systems, leveraging technology, making our procurement processes more efficient so that we're getting the best value out of our contracts. Those are all the ways that we're able to identify and acknowledge a reduction in cost as part of a greater program.
Right. So I don't know, I kind of have some grief with that one, but, and then why have, there's probably only 3 of us in the room that remember back, yeah, you're one of them, 25 years ago when a group of community members got together with the city and built the phone book on the capital budget, and it's, somebody help me. You know what I'm talking about, right? Scott Burns and all those guys put together that report on our unfunded capital. They literally sat down for a year and worked with the city right next to them and put together a snapshot of it and made suggestions. Why have we not gone out and found in this stage of it, not get to the point where we've already baked some of our observations and findings and then present it to the community? Why have we not, in this organic part of the development of it, have we not reached out into the community and found some reasonable people who could help with that perspective?
Councilmember Jordan, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I'm not up to speed on that process that was done
Before, it was
ago.
well before your time.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Councilmember Jordan, I'll try and chime in on that a little bit. So that task force was heavily involved with unfunded infrastructure, I think is what you're alluding to. And that became the precipice of Measure C and that and all our work towards that. That was really the launching point of that. To your point, that is a very important piece, right? And that really successful tax Measure C. So.
Really, my point in question is then why are we not emulating that in its organic growth of this process? Why are we waiting till the end to make presentations to the community and having them just reflect on report outs kind of thing?
Yeah, Councilmember Jordan, I mean, the whole sole premise behind Vision 2030 is exactly that kind of work. And all options are really on the table in every group. And I think something like that should definitely be, and we probably would explore. And I just wanted to chime in on your prior question too, that the pension management strategy was also directly in response to reducing expenses, right? That's an ongoing liability that really we want to address.
Right.
And so that was a very important piece to address that long term.
That's-
And that was a bold strategy from our council to be forward-looking and take that on.
Yep. One more question, and it's just a wonky question on those charts with the feathers or whatever they are, and the weight on the bottom and the revenue on top. I mean, the goal there is to look for something with a low weight and a high return, right? That'd be the ultimate thing you could find in the haystack, right?
Yes, Councilmember Jordan, the staff put a weighting scale on basically the work that it would take to not only get the additional revenue measure either approved by the city council or passed by the voters, but the level of effort it would take to actually administer that potential revenue source as well, and then weighting that against the amount of projected annual revenue that we could achieve.
So
and
just-
ideally, we would want revenue options that give us the highest amount of revenue for the lowest sort of level of effort to get it adopted or implemented, and then the lowest level of effort to actually continue implementing it.
And that could, so I'm looking at the one that's the taxes ranking on the top and the fee on the bottom. So like TOT audit, it's heavily weighted, but that's because we're paying for it. It involves staff time, and we will get some return. Parking fee increases, again, that might be more of a political pushback waiting for that one on the difficulty. It's not really the staff issue. It's just click a thing and you raise the rate, right? But so you're looking at both, you know, the what you would call the angst waiting as well as the practical implementation of it, right?
Councilmember Jordan, that is absolutely correct. We did our best to anticipate all of those considerations, both the pressure or the communication that would come about from the public by proposing some of those changes, the administrative sort of options, the systems that we have in place to administer them, the legal requirements, all of those things were considered by staff.
Okay. Thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just to weigh in real quick on that one question, Mr. Jordan. So yeah, it was back when we had the citizen group get together and talk about precisely our capital priorities, and that put together our polling data, which we finally went out and did what I call the Randy and Bendy show. Is Bendy White and I went out and we did the outreach to get the priorities settled for Measure C. And we're currently in a similar process right now as Essential Santa Barbara. We're going around and talking to public groups and stakeholders to get their input about their priorities. Back then, it was strictly about capital, mostly about road conditions, and now we have services and stuff in general that we are talking to the general public about. So it's not a specific task force like we put together last time. A lot of those folks came forward and are now on our Measure C oversight committee, but we are kind of doing something along those lines, but yeah, the public outreach is important. I agree. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few questions. The first one, have we talked about consumption lounges? Don't answer that. I just wanted to see the mayor's reaction. Just wanted to see your reaction, Mayor.
You know we're on television, right?
I know. You got to lighten it up a little bit. So first, I just want to thank our staff, and in particular the Thriving Workforce and IDEA teams. It's great to see that that number of staff from the different departments coming together. I think that gets to breaking down the barriers between the different departments and the different divisions in there. So just having those interactions, and thank you, all of you, for volunteering your time to do that. It's very important work. So just a couple questions. In terms of looking at revenue enhancements and stability of revenues, I don't even know if we're the ones to address this, but in terms of economic development and prioritizing certain industries, how are we looking at perhaps TOT and trying to get something outside of TOT, because that's so volatile, to have another stable type of sources of revenue, just in a general sense?
So Councilmember Friedman, so just in general, the different options that staff kind of came up with weren't like necessarily directly related to a particular development project necessarily. We just sort of looked at it broadly. And we did look at the level of volatility of the revenue sources, transient occupancy tax being one of the most volatile, sales tax also being rather volatile. Some of the other taxes aren't as volatile. So we did look at that as a consideration.
Okay, so we're looking at to try to have less volatility in the future as going forward, trying to plan for ways to address the volatility of the hotel bed tax.
Yes, Councilmember Friedman, yes, I think that is fair. It is also fair to say, though, that some of our more volatile revenue sources do generate a lot of revenue when times are good. And so it's important that we have a sort of well-balanced, sort of a mix of revenue sources, and we do have that here, so just sort of looking at the totality is important.
Thank you. In terms of maybe slide 37 might answer this, if you could pull up slide 37. The second one from the left, the leader development. So my question gets into succession planning for the organization. Can you speak to how this Vision 2030 plays into that in the long run? Because we want to ensure that we have people that are starting out in the city, we have people that are 10 to 15 years, and then as people are retiring, we have that institutional knowledge and we're able to promote from within the organization here. So can you speak to this effort for succession planning?
Absolutely, Mayor and Council Member Friedman. CLA, it's actually going on right now, and people have to apply and be nominated for that program. It covers a lot of different areas, and it's for aspiring leaders. So it really does cover that succession planning. Department heads look at applications and say, yes, this person needs to take this to really get them to rise to the next level. It might be a few years, but at least they have those tools, those experiences, those connections to get them there. So it's absolutely in the spirit of succession planning. Oftentimes there are situations where people get promoted just because they've been there a long time. And that happens, and that's great, but we want to make sure that those people are prepared to be successful in those roles, because a lot of those skills are also transferable. So we absolutely have our eye on what the future looks like. I think it's, 50% of our organization is eligible for retirement within the next 10 years. That's kind of scary. So what are we doing to be proactive?
Thank you, and it's encouraging the numbers you showed on the vacancies that we have past versus present, because that gets in that ground floor, so they're getting that experience here.
Absolutely.
My last question, you mentioned as part of thriving workforce and supporting our workforce, you mentioned parental leave, but what about childcare? Because that is a major issue for families once before you can get them into elementary school. How are we addressing that issue?
Absolutely. I think one of your colleagues is on the Child Care Coalition to address issues like that, and that's a regional partnership. That is one of the issues that arose, one of the topics that came up in our brainstorm session. It's really difficult. There is a dearth of child care providers in our area. So I think as far as this group, we can make recommendations, but I don't know if we can actually solve the problem without additional help. At one time, the city did have a child care facility, but I don't think it was used as frequently as needed. During COVID, we tried to do some child care. Parks and Rec actually set up a program for school-age children, but there wasn't a lot of participation, and probably because of COVID and the implications that held. We know this is an issue, and I think some of our flex work and remote work possibilities can address some of that. We need to be modern, we need to be flexible, and we need to understand that there are working families, and to be mindful of that when we do hire and the policies and programs that we have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. And I'll save my comments of appreciation for when the time comes, but for the questions. The first question I have, I love the slide 20 with the weighted score and the revenue and the winner star there. It's very clear. My question, and it relates to this slide and then also slide 18, or other ones that are similar that have the end of the process being city council review. And I guess my question is, how does city council weigh in? And really specifically, can we have a weighted score in the process? Like, I would love to see the list of 70 options and ideas and pick from that which ones might be council priorities to align with in that consideration. So when does council weigh in, and can we have a sort of weight on the score?
Councilmember Sneddon, thank you so much again for that question. Absolutely. And so we are envisioning a couple steps, definitely Finance Committee initially for an initial pass and then to full City Council. I will work directly with the City Administrator's Office to determine the scheduling and take your feedback as to the sort of how much time and the involvement. But I think that is an absolutely great consideration and should be included. The end result, for some of these potential revenue solutions, some of these require City Council approval, some require voter approval, so there's a legal process to kind of step through to get to those steps, and so we will work together on that.
Thank you. But even, I guess, maybe follow up on the prioritization of those. So if it's coming to Finance Committee, that's very focused on the sort of financial implications or that ratio that you were talking about of income to effort. But I'm wondering more about just council priorities, that maybe it isn't quite as clear that this is, revenue generator versus the effort, but it happens to matter a lot to the majority of council. And so we have our budget hearings, and we're weighing in on council priorities there. But I'm wondering if there might be a process for us to do a survey even, or a straw poll vote on, out of these 70, are we on the right track? Because by the time it goes to Finance Committee and that's all been hammered out, then it comes to council for review, but not necessarily input on the ground level.
Councilmember Sneddon, again, I think it's a great idea, and I fully support that. And I think in the upcoming budget conversations that we'll be having with council, first, related to the priority setting process with the council upcoming in February, just next month, that will be the first opportunity to really sort of understand how and when council can kind of weigh in on these options as it relates to the City Council priorities. And then we have the budget work session that's scheduled for March 5th. That is another opportunity for staff to receive council's feedback on how these measures could lay into those priorities. And then we kind of start the budget process. And so I think there is ample opportunity, and we'll make sure that occurs.
Great. I think that would be a great time to be able to sort of weigh in on what the winners are.
Councilmember Sneddon, if I could just chime in real quick too, that the thought behind Vision 2032 is that it would be dynamic, and why it's a multi-year effort. And we realize that there's a trial and error process to a lot of these processes as well. So our thought was we would also be responsive to council priorities when we have better processes in place to fully understand what council's priorities are and how we can respond to those and involve you and more.
That's great. Thank you. And then I have a question about the I suggest. Is it anonymous, or is there an option for anonymous input? I think the sensitivities of there may be employees who want to share ideas but not necessarily have their name attached to it.
Councilmember Sneddon, thank you for that question. We considered that because there is a potential for a cash prize. We haven't had a request to be anonymous. We do have a way to submit without a name. I don't know if it would be advantageous to the employee. I think what we're trying to do with I Suggest is really allow employees to have their voices heard, to really have them put their thumbprint on some of our processes to make things better, to streamline, to take away those pain points.
Thank you. I have heard feedback from some individuals that they're not participating because they don't want their name attached to it. And I think even a digital anonymous way, it'd be great if there was a suggestion box, a sealed suggestion box that employees could feel completely anonymous for the betterment of the organization.
Absolutely.
I think.
Good. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And then, so how much of the thriving workforce has to do with, or is this something to address, sort of hierarchy versus flat organization or empowerment of employees to be, it seems to be in this direction of decision makers and having input. How much of the Vision 2030 has to do with that? Or if you could give more detail on that.
Councilmember Sneddon, one of my key mantras is you are empowered to bring these forward. You are empowered to take your recommendations and move them forward. This is not a me, this is a you. So I think I underscore that with every meeting because I really do think it's important to empower our employees.
I agree. And then would that be also within departments? Like, is it part of Vision 2030? And I'm genuinely asking, I don't know if this is one of the tenets of it, but that within departments, people feel empowered to be team members versus hierarchical, or is that even part of it?
Absolutely, Councilmember Sneddon. We encourage everyone on the Thriving Workforce to go back to their departments, to talk about what this program is, to get people involved, to have people come, invite them in. It's really important. It's a way to break down those silos, to get to know who you work with and what they do. So we're all part of the same team, one city, one team. So I think it's really important to do so, to involve the team.
Thank you. And then for Thriving Workforce, we talked about benefits or pay, retention. Could you give us sort of an update on the class and comp study timeline and how that factors into this timeline? It seemed the goal to be adequately staffed by 2024, but if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely, Councilmember Sneddon. So the class and comp is actually on schedule. So we should see a draft report at least by the end of April, early May. And then because the results of any classifications and wages need to be bargained, we will have to go through a negotiation process. So it's going to take time still. We do have some groups that are not represented, and that might be a little bit smoother and more rapid of a process. But the other groups are represented, and so we do have a duty to meet and confer on those.
Which is a good idea. I agree with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so then I have some questions about revenue maximization. So I just want to know if these are on the list. Fees to mitigate impacts to affordable housing, so things like fees for hotel development, for instance, increasing those fees, or fees for creating luxury housing, or fees for vacant commercial buildings downtown. Are these types of fees, are any of these being considered or on the list?
Councilmember Sneddon, again, thank you for that question. Of those that you listed, like a vacancy tax has been considered. It is on the list. Also, development impact fees in general are on the list as well and have been part of our evaluation.
Great, thank you. And so that might also consider hotel development, for instance, or any kind of development?
Really, any kind of development.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear, thank you. And then I think those were all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gutierrez.
I have a quick question. My colleagues asked all of my questions on, I think it's the first slide, on phase 1, the city is properly staffed. I know that for some departments it's harder to staff than others. For those departments that are having challenges to recruit for these vacant positions, what has the city or those departments done to recruit people to these positions?
That's a great question, Councilmember Gutierrez. We are trying to be creative, thinking of, is there a hiring incentive? We really need to think in terms of balance, though, because then you have the issue of potentially, how do existing employees feel? So as we negotiate our MOUs and as we do things, how do we become more attractive? Where are we advertising? Are there other places? How can we reach out? Do we hold like one-day seminars or one-day, training or not really training, but a ride-along and things of that nature to really get to know the city? We participate in job fairs. we're using LinkedIn, so we're trying to be really creative. We're looking at hiring incentives that make sense. But there are different things that are important to different people. So it's a process, and it takes a lot of brainstorming and ideating.
Thank you.
So a quick question, I think for Mr. DeMartini. I know that Mr. Jordan brought up parking fees. In fact, yeah, it looks like you could raise fees, but once again, there's a very delicate balance between the elasticity of what customers want to do and that fee itself, and we've seen that over the years. But I was wondering about other departments, because we have obviously ones that provide services like the library or Parks and Rec that you're not going to fully recover the cost, or you're going to recover a relatively small amount of the cost. Then community development has always been a curious one for me, because it's, we can constantly hear about permit fees, and we certainly don't want to put the kibosh on, residential development per se, but do we have, for example, for different kinds of services, an actual schedule of fees? I assume that they would. And do we have, along with that, our expense in doing that? And why I bring this up is that it appeared to me during the discussion about the private property parklets that we charge them less than we would normally would for a coastal development fee, because frankly, we didn't have the cost involved in it. So I didn't know if we had a published sliding scale, if we just went along, if that's something that you even deal with, or if that is presented to you by community development. They say, here's the numbers. How does all that work? Because clearly, community development is one place where we strive to, as with public works, try to do as close to full cost recovery as possible.
Mayor Rouse, again, thank you for that question. So the first thing I'll say is that the city every year publishes what's called a master fee schedule, and it is on the website, available to the public, and it lists every single fee that the city charges for every service that has a fee. That process is done annually in conjunction with the budget process. And during the budget, when council adopts the budget in June, you also adopt a resolution that is basically the update to the master fee schedule. And that gets posted on the city's website. I will also say that the cost recovery and revenue policy that council also adopted during the last budget cycle is now the city's guideline. It is staff's guideline, and it also is your tool to really help us all evaluate the appropriate level of potential subsidization, or what the appropriate cost recovery level is for all of the services that have a fee associated with it. So that is now our guideline going forward. Now, in particular, for fees that are in community development, I can just talk generally about it. They conduct a comprehensive fee study every couple of years. And that really sort of re-baselines what it costs to provide the level of permit review, design review, building review, all the different types of permits and applications that get submitted to that office. In general, most of those services should be fully cost recoverable. But as I sort of showed on one of my slides earlier, there are different levels of tiers. Some of the services that they provide not only the benefit to the individual or the business or the property owner, it may have a broader public benefit to the community to ensure the safety of people that might go into a facility or a building. And so there might be an adequate or appropriate level of subsidization on some of those fees. In general, when new fees are being proposed, the starting place should be maximizing the level of cost recovery, at least to start, and then through the public process with various committees and boards, and then ultimately the city council working with you to determine what should be the level that the fee should be set at.
Well, since we're a labor-driven organization, so we have a fair understanding of what's going to happen with that every year, so that would help drive that fee schedule, because once again, you hear us being compared with other adjacent communities and whatnot, and so and if there's a market component or there's not for any kind of programming like that, it's something that, I don't know how much granularity would be productive, but it is trying to understand exactly what it is we're doing and how we're handing out those fees. So thank you.
Thank you.
And then last part of Mr. Latchford on the communication, I agree. Our communication has had its moments, ups and downs, and the better we can do, the better we're going to not only serve the public, but take a lot of pressure off of what we get in terms of questions, in terms of angst, in terms of the basic understanding of what we do as an organization. So whatever, I don't personally find a lot of satisfaction just publishing notices on websites or in water bills. So whatever it is you can come up with, I'd be a big fan to find out and see exactly what better outreach things would be, short of doing PSAs or whatever, to get the public informed and up to speed on what we're doing and why we're doing it. So thank you. Any other further comments or questions from council? Yes, there are, as a matter of fact, and we'll start with Mr. Jordan.
Won the lottery, huh? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I asked this question, and I'll just continue to make this comment, and I'll give you an example on one of your slides. But I think we're missing an opportunity to find subject matter intelligent experts out in the community who could play with this process with us side by side now and bring a perspective that's, hate the phrase, outside the box, so to speak, rather than inside the box. I'll just give you an example on your events and nonprofit slide on 27. So I'm currently involved with some event work with Visit Santa Barbara, and it's been made painfully obvious to me that we're a weird city that does a lot of events, and our method of doing events is everybody on that list. You have to go see everybody on that list separately if you want to do an event. We don't have a one-stop, one-person event thing, and I don't know that anybody on that list cares, because that's what they do. They all have a little chunk in the events, whereas many other cities, if not our size, but with our number of events, would have a coordinated entry system that would handle your entire event logistics for you. And I think if you were talking to somebody outside of our internal stakeholders, you would hear that loudly. So that's just an example. And it's just me. I just look at stuff weird. Agree that the way to really chase this big picture is much more innovation and integration. Use of, tech, but frequently we use tech in the words of something that's already been around for 20 years, and we're finally catching up to adopting it. It seems to me we, again, in not involving people from outside of our organization, we end up adopting something thinking we're moving ahead in the tech world, and then it painfully doesn't work. And so I would just use whatever the last version of in and out of parking lots we bought, and we find out then that they aren't working well for non-staffed 24-hour use, and somebody just puts the bars up at 8 o'clock at night and goes home, and everybody can drive in and out of the parking lot for free. It happens right down the street here. So when we're using that innovation and tech-based stuff, it has to work for where we want it to get it to, and it has to be bulletproof. And if that means we have to spend some more money rather than less money and end up getting what we get, I think that's the case that has to be made. And then finally, Brian and I have had plenty of talks on this, and I think we suffer horribly from a lack of effective internal coordination on our publicity, outreach, that type of thing. We have multiple departments sending out their own information, then being duplicated by, say, a PIO sitting in this building. I don't know where to look. If I don't know where to look all the time, then I know people in the public don't know where to go look. I don't know that we're doing any work to make yesterday's next door post by some department in the city or yesterday's Facebook post by somebody in the city rise to the top of either of my next door lists or Facebook lists, because frequently I'll see a media release and then I'll see it on my Facebook page 3 weeks later. So I know Facebook's gaming me for some reason there, but I know there's methods to make that happen. But as Randy said, we all spend way too much time reacting to information that's already out there or available from the city already, but people haven't seen it for whatever reason. And just my personal use of online platforms, it's not that you're not looking, it's somehow just not being delivered well to you. And so it kind of self-defeating to say, oh, we're on social media, or hey, the library's on social media. I would have to go into one of those things and search for the library or search for something to have it pop up and to risk never having seen it. And so it just, it doesn't seem to be accomplishing what it, in a perfect world, what it should be accomplishing. We're in the backyard of one of the greatest tech universities in the country. I don't understand what prevents us from getting people for 6 months at a time that need a really, not a sit around and stuff newsletters internship, but something where they're actually acting like an employee and getting into the nuts and the bolts as some background with the city and bringing their perspective, younger, more up to date maybe with stuff that's going on out there in the real world, that kind of thing. So I hope that when this does come to council that we're not given just a choice of, well, this is what it is and we got to move forward with it. We're not going to go backwards, and that's my big fear. Is I'm kind of talking like, I think this thing's already moving towards baking a cake that it's going to be a different flavor cake than I'm going to be happy with. And so I'm hopeful that doesn't happen, but looking forward to seeing this continue to go forward. And I get that this is as everything else, a multi-year process, so I'll kind of hold my jets a little bit for that and try and think of that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Gutierrez.
I agree with my colleague, Mike Jordan, on how it used to be a little crazy with the news information that was out there. But my comments were a little bit more positive. Since I started council, and I will be very honest, I don't have a background. I used to not have a background in politics and city government. Now I do. And I can tell you, at least also from my district, and that it's majority Spanish speaking in my district, I can tell you that the city has improved a lot in their outreach and communication. Brian, you have been very just opened to suggestions and willing to give information out. I see more things in social media, and that's a new way that people communicate nowadays. And I've heard it actually from other places in the city how it's also easier to understand and read when the communications come out. So I'm really grateful for that. And I just want to thank the whole team, because as individuals, I've met with you guys separately, and you guys have been very responsive and follow-throughs with suggestions. And I've been very vocal about we need to outreach to the community. We have to, think outside of the box. And you guys have done it. And I know it's not easy, but from when I started to now, we have improved so much in each department. So thank you so much.
Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. My first comment is really just thank you. Thank you for this update. Thank you for letting us know when the next update is coming. And thank you for really allowing us to be part of this process. I think I understand that this is mostly an internal process and from city administrator office vision. And so I'm appreciating that we can have input to this process. Some comments, it's great to see the vacancy rate decreasing. That was really welcome news. It really was great to see the members of the team. So thank you for sharing that and seeing especially that some members are double duty on more than one team. And I just really want to take the opportunity to thank the members of these teams for serving. It is a lot of extra work, and it's going to make a better organization. Really, the public information has really become more modern and intentional, and really appreciating that, Mr. Latchford. And I think as we're broadening that, and I think we've all had conversations with you about how we can ourselves help spread those messages more too. So I appreciate the responsiveness of that also. It's really my sincere hope, I know it's all of our sincere hope, that we can be an employer of choice. And I think we're heading that direction, particularly the class and comp study and taking that seriously, that we need to be matching or bettering our local competition. And the efforts here for input on morale and work culture, I think, was recognizing that needed to happen, and I think it's great progress in that. Now we'll go to my other comments. This continues to be an issue for me, and I will really keep hammering it. I would love for one of the pillars, or even a crossbar on the stool somewhere, to be DEIA, and it really needs to be a through line across all of these pillars. I will continue to voice this, that I just don't believe it's appropriate to rebrand the A in DEIA to be action. That would be a change that would need to come from the accessibility community to want to have a different letter for that, and I think it creates a lot of confusion even on some of the slides. Like slide 36 has ideas as a category, but it doesn't mean our rebranded IDEA. And so on a couple different slides we have reference to ideas, but it doesn't mean the idea that we're rebranding. And I really think for the accessibility community to continue to leave that word out when DEIA is a thing. Even on the slide 37, it calls for DEI training, but leaves off the A. Like, why leave off the A of accessibility? It's such a fundamental part of government and community. So to call it DEI training and then refer to it later in that same column as DEIA, an idea, it leads to confusion. And I think I don't know how many times to say it or how strong to say it, but to rebrand accessibility to be action is almost further an insult to accessibility, because action is something that is limited in someone who has accessibility issues. So I'm just not understanding that, and I really think it should just be DEIA. And if you want to add an extra A, DEIAA for action, fine, but to replace the A of accessibility with another term, I think is not appropriate. Then just another comment, I think given that we're in transition to new city administration, I'm just proposing that we, before our summer update, we really allow for input of our new leadership when they're present to sort of, it's going to take a big concerted effort from the city administrator's office to see this through, and there might be an adjustment to something like that, like the DEIA or how the pillars are presented. But that's obviously an internal, and that's just a suggestion. I'm really looking forward to how council can have input as well, and I think we're really moving in on that, and to, in Mike Jordan's vernacular, not be presented a baked cake, but be able to add some ingredients, and looking forward to that. And then again, just recognizing this is an internal vision and seeing that as such. And really just want to reiterate last points that I think it is a good idea to look at the revenue maximization. I know you're looking at that, but particularly with development impact fees, vacancy impact fees, and just to reiterate the suggestion that there be an anonymous paper copy option for the I suggest. I think you may get more ideas that haven't come forward yet, but overall, just really thank you, and especially thank you for the very concentrated work on this and presenting it to council. It's really appreciated.
All right, very good. I actually failed to announce public comment if there's any on this one, so we're going to have the council go ahead and speak first, and at the end, if there are people online who wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I want to thank the staff that presenting today and the leadership, but also all the staff that volunteered your time to make this happen and give valuable feedback. And for the nearly 60% who took the survey, that's a really high response rate. As we know, many times surveys, you're lucky if you get 30% is a good survey response. And so the more that respond, the more data we have. I also want to appreciate my colleagues on the Finance Committee, Councilmember Gutierrez and Councilmember Harmon, because we, in the last year or two, we've really grappled with a lot of these issues. It's very complex, and when we first got on finance, there were things, but there wasn't as much in-depth that we were tasked to work with. And we've been doing a lot of great work with the staff and looking at these as the first vetting. And example is the pension management. And just those strategies. And one example of pension management that we're doing is we prepay up front the unfunded liability. You can either pay to CalPERS monthly or upfront that annual cost, and by paying it up front, we save over $1 million a year. So that's $1 million that's out there, and then the pension trust fund is going to give us a higher rate of return long term. One of the things, it just brings me, I love this because it gets into the weeds, and at the end of the day, we see better services for the public when this gets implemented. And it brings me back when I was studying at Northridge in public administration, and there's a concept, we talk about best value, but there's a concept throughout public administration called public value that was identified by Mark Moore in public administration, and it's widely known. And we study that a lot. And what it comes down to with public value is that decisions are made in furthering the common good and the public interest. And so at a policy level, you're basically looking at every tax dollar that comes in and goes out. What is the public good that's coming out of it, the public value? That's the concept. And this is in line with that because we're really looking at how we serve the public to the maximum extent practicable within the organization and within the services that are delivered. And it's really heartening because then you see these positive outcomes, and it makes the city and our staff, they see the reaction from the public. So if you're doing it correctly, which this is putting us on a path to do that, it's really rewarding for our staff to be able to say, they built this in the community, or they created a new website that is better serves the community than the old one, and they can point to that work because then there's a value that our staff sees as well. And so as part of it, I'm going to get a little wonky because this is an opportunity to do that because we do have a shorter meeting, but I won't go too long. Part of the public value that Mark Moore created, it's a triangle. It's called the strategic triangle, and at the top is the public value of the public, but the other is operational feasibility and public support and legitimacy. And that's what this is really looking at is what's the value, how can we do it within the organization with our resources, and the third and most important is the public itself will be supportive of it. And through all this, we're really looking at that. So I appreciate that we're not only looking to maximize revenues, but also looking at how we can improve our operations, because that's how we can go to the public and we say we need new revenue enhancements, potential measures. We can also go back and say, well, we've looked at our own internal processes and we have done business a better way. We have done what the private sector does and looks at the efficiencies of our programming and made changes. And so it helps inform the public that we're doing. It's not just asking for more money or more revenue without doing the hard work to get to a place where we can say we've tried all these innovations and we still need those for the services such as parks, libraries, community development, and public safety. And again, just examples, we mentioned the pension trust fund that Vision 2030 has, but also I would include the local housing trust fund that the council and the community came together as a prime example of public value, and what the organization is doing as well, because that was a shift within our policies to take revenues and create a fund that will maximize and be that will enable us to get new revenues to support affordable housing projects, which will hopefully get city workers and public workers from the private sector to be able to live here. And that gets in the heart of this, of what we're trying to do. And then also the public interfaces with the different departments that we're going through as part of the internal optimizations such as reforming the community development department, many of the changes that we're making to speed up the process. So I've talked long enough, so I just wanted to thank everybody and appreciate all the work and look forward to continuing this conversation.
Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, there's not much more that someone could possibly add to all of that, but I'm going to try. I really do, as my colleagues have said, appreciate this work that's being done. I truly thank you very much. I mean, to me, seeing it all in one presentation, as Councilmember Friedman indicated, we have seen bits and pieces and certain elements have come to Finance Committee, but to see it sort of all in one place really hits home to me what a huge undertaking this is. I mean, just really significant. And look, organizational development is so far outside of my wheelhouse that I wouldn't even attempt to comment on the substance other than to say it's very impressive. And what is clear to me is that by the end of this process, we will have come up with efficiencies and synergies whose purpose will be to serve the public. Certainly to make our organization work better, to make our employees happier, but what I love and what has come through, I think particularly in this presentation, is how that has been integrated with how can we do better for our residents and ourselves. Like, it is this collective effort, and it's just really impressive. So I'm very excited to see where this goes. And I also just wanted to sort of maybe ring a little bit of a different bell with regards to when these things come back to us as a council. While there is a part of me that very much agrees, would like to see the ingredients, not just the baked cake, I think the bigger part of me sees the process that is being undertaken here, and I think there's huge value in bringing to us the outcome of that process. I don't actually want to see a list of 70 things. That is the work that you all are doing, and I feel very strongly that if empowerment is critical to us and is something that we believe in, us as a council needs to empower those of you that are doing this work to bring forward the best ideas to serve our organization and our community. So I think for me, that's where I'm coming down, and I very much trust that all of you who are engaged in this day after day will be able to find the right balance between bringing a list to us and bringing a fully baked cake. So with that, thank you very much for all the work, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo my colleagues' comments and praise for all the hard work that you've all done. The only thing is when it comes to the dissemination of information, especially when it comes to like social media, I still, and I've asked this for I feel like years now, when it comes to these media releases, I don't see how I can share them via the different social media platforms. So I think if we want to be able to share information to the public and to the future prospects, we should have it so that these news media releases, press releases, newsletters, what have you, are shareable to all the social media platforms that we can share them to. Yeah, I'm looking at one right now about the Franceschi House open house. There's an image attached to it, but it's just an image of the house. There's no information on it. So if we could have like thumbnail images with text explaining what's happening that could easily be shared, I'd really much appreciate that, and I think the public would as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers online?
No raised hands, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. There's no action on this item, so we'll move on to council and staff communications and council member engagements. Are there anything to, yes, Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I just wanted to share, Sherry Ray stopped by our office today, and she autographed this copy of her book, A String of Pearls, Pearl Chase of Santa Barbara, for the council office. So this will be in the office, but that also she's giving a talk on February 8th at the UCSB library, and I thought that might be of interest to members of the public.
All right, very good. Anyone else with anything? Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 1 second here. Trying to find it. Just a second. I just want to give my respects to the family of Margie Yayavi. She passed away, and she was very very kind soul and positive influence on the community, and just want to say that she's very much going to be missed.
All right, very good. And if there's nothing else, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.